Deep in a dark, gloomy mine, a cute little red phantom beast is digging like crazy, while a majestic head knight swings his sword next to it, looking absolutely done with life. You'd probably think this is some ancient, mystical, high-level magical forging ritual, or maybe a noble knight fighting off some evil, abyssal monster deep underground. But actually, it's just a ruthless boss forcing his phantom beast to scarf down dirt and crap out steel, while making the honorable knight stand behind it and chop this waste into steel blocks to lay a foundation. Who would have thought he'd turn a grand isekai adventure into a 24/7 automated mining sweatshop? And the start of this hardcore infrastructure trip takes us back to a few days ago. Because of a few recent events, key figures like Harvel and the local residents had their approval ratings go up, so the RP points had racked up to 639. I leveled up basic design and surveying to intermediate. Intermediate design lets me draw blueprints directly on paper, and intermediate surveying lets me see through 5 meters of solid rock. After using this skill to find a safe path through the mountain, I got ready to start digging, but the little guy had already collapsed from building roads day in and day out, and digging with just manpower would take way too much time. So, looks like it was time to pull another phantom partner. The second pull cost 70 RP. Sure enough, the magic circle was just as tiny this time. Even the entrance was exactly the same as the little guy's. But it could also be gigantified using red seeds, and its skill perfectly solved our upcoming construction problems. The tunnel digging operation began. Step 1. Have the giant-sized Little Bell at the very front of our makeshift tunnel borer, eating the dirt. Step 2. Have Harvel get ready in the back, because Little Bell's skill converts the eaten dirt into steel and shoots it out. Step 3. Harvel cuts them to a specific length. Step 4. The workers craft this steel into support beams for the foundation. By this point, Harvel looked completely dead inside, thinking about how a dignified knight like himself was stuck underground slicing snake poop. A few weeks passed like this, and the tunnel was getting closer and closer to the anthracite coal. Suddenly, Harvel spoke up, reminding me, "Young master, you should probably head out and get some rest." I told him I was the boss here, so I had to stay on site. In my old world, too many bosses would just preach from up high, but you'd never see a single one of them in the field. So I swore I'd never be that kind of guy. I used intermediate surveying to look ahead, and saw the coal seam right in front of us. I immediately hyped up the workers. "We're almost there. Give it everything you've got. Remember, everyone, once we hit the coal seam, we pull back the bore and widen the tunnel." Suddenly, I heard movement on the other side of the dirt. Using my X-ray vision, I found a hole had appeared up ahead, and it was getting bigger. The very next second, a massive ant-like creature burst out of the soil. Seeing this, Harvel instantly drew his sword, slicing off the creature's mandibles with a single strike. I followed up, swinging my iron shovel and smashing it down. I was shocked. The novel definitely didn't mention these things being in the cave, but the most terrifying part was, there wasn't just one. Since they're a social hive species, they were swarming toward us in endless waves. Seeing the situation, I yelled for everyone to evacuate immediately. Harvel rushed to block the entrance with his sword, but there were just too many. Plus, oxygen in the cave was already running low. He wouldn't last much longer. Since coming to this world, this was the first time I really panicked. "Young master, snap out of it, don't panic," and that slap woke me right up. I had a plan. I immediately told Harvel we were breaking through the front lines and going straight into the ant nest. Harvel thought the idea was insane, but he did it anyway, because he trusted I had a good reason. Meanwhile, the Baron got the news. He immediately geared up and rushed his soldiers toward the mine. Back on our side, because we kept pushing into the nest, we were completely surrounded. I realized my man Harvel was just about at his limit, but finally, I found exactly what I was looking for. The methane pocket. "Harvel, I'll dig the hole, you chop the ants." I went full throttle, digging straight down. Suddenly, a piercing screech echoed from inside. I looked over, and it was the queen ant. But man, this thing was way too huge. "Harvel, can you hold her off?" He immediately said no. But at a time like this, even if he couldn't, he had to try. Harvel pushed all his magic power to the limit and clashed head-on with the queen ant in a single strike. His hands went completely numb from the shock, but he still managed to parry the queen's attack. I took the chance to just dig. Finally, at the crucial moment, I hit the methane. I screamed at Harvel to run for the nest entrance. After jumping out of the opening, I tossed a lit torch right into the nest. A massive explosion ripped through the air. Outside the cave, the arriving Baron heard the blast echoing from within. At the critical moment, it was Harvel who tanked most of the explosion's force himself. As the dust settled, I looked at the nest entrance. The plan actually worked, but Harvel had fallen unconscious protecting me. Even Little Bell passed out from the shockwave. And the worst part, the exit was completely blocked by the blast. If we don't dig our way out fast, everyone will die of hypoxia. But it looks like there's at least 5 meters of rock to get through, and the oxygen here is running dangerously low. As a ruthless capitalist who swore to never leave his employees behind, is my grand isekai infrastructure plan really going to suffocate to death with a bunch of giant ants down in this pitch-black mine? This young master is clearly pampered and delicate, yet he risked his life to lead the charge into the mine. The workers were moved to tears, swearing loyalty to their saintly lord. But you'd never guess. He's only pushing himself this hard to hoard all the profits and ruthlessly exploit his labor force. Just a moment ago, Harvel caught a blurry glimpse of the young master still pushing forward before completely passing out. Suddenly, a system prompt chimed in. "Harvel admires your relentless spirit. Affection increased by 6 points. You now have 157 RP points. Talk about a silver lining." I immediately started searching through my knowledge base for ways to evolve my skills. The conclusion? My only shot at survival was to evolve the Azrahan mental technique. I dumped all my RP points into upgrades, and at the very last second, I pushed the technique to the dual ring level. Now my magic amplification is at 200%, and I scored 2 new skills, Vigorous Vitality and Explosive Potential. I instantly activated Vigorous Vitality. The effect, 10 minutes of tireless, non-stop action. For those 10 minutes, I only had one thought in my head. Keep digging, and digging. But the effect wore off. I was still 3 meters away from oxygen. I couldn't give up yet. I triggered my final skill, Explosive Potential. Whether or not I could pull off a miracle all came down to these last 20 seconds. I grabbed the shovel and kept pushing forward. But even giving it my all, I was still 30 centimeters short. And my oxygen? Completely gone. At that moment, I was truly out of options. I was supposed to live out my days enjoying the sweet life of a noble son. But it looked like that wasn't happening. Suddenly, I heard a faint noise up ahead. I looked over, and it was my little bro breaking through the dirt. Following right behind him was a rush of precious oxygen. After taking a huge breath, I struggled to my feet. I couldn't give up now. After all, that sweet noble life was still waiting for me. Barely hanging on to consciousness, I slowly carried Havel out of the mine on my back. The Baron and his men were already exploring deeper inside. The second I saw them, my body just completely gave out, and I passed out cold. When I woke up again, a few days had already passed. The first thing I saw was a system reward. Due to your massive social contribution, a one-time reward of 500 RP points has been issued. I was feeling pretty exhausted, but seeing that reward, I couldn't help but smirk. 500 RP points. That is a huge payout. After getting some rest, I headed back down to the mine to check on the ant nest and the construction progress. Thanks to the whole ant beast incident, the workers were now looking at me with pure hero worship. It was honestly a lot of pressure. Havel came up, looking confused, and asked why I personally took on such a dangerous job when I could have just made the workers do it. He was seriously wondering if I risked my neck out of genuine concern for their safety, and I told him that as the guy in charge, I had to step up and take on the danger myself. That way, even if I rake in the lion's share of the profits, they can't say a word behind my back. Havel was speechless. He truly couldn't figure out if I was actually a good guy or a villain. Suddenly, using my X-ray vision, I noticed something behind the dirt wall. I started digging without a second thought, figuring it was probably just ant eggs. But when I broke through, I was absolutely stunned. It was an orc, tied up and trapped. Right then, a wicked idea popped into my head. An orc's labor power is worth like a dozen humans. I immediately brought him back to my territory. After questioning him, I found out he was actually the son of the orc chief. Arash promised he would never forget this life-saving favor, saying he'd help me out with whatever I needed. Hearing that, I couldn't hide my massive greedy grin. Then get me 120 orc laborers to work in the mine. But Arash shut that down hard. He said orcs are warriors, and warriors only take orders from other warriors. Since I wasn't one, I couldn't command them even if he lent them to me. So that was the catch. I learned that their coming-of-age ceremony involved bringing back the head of an ant beast. Arash had accidentally stumbled too deep into the nest, got hit with a paralyzing stinger, and ended up trapped. Well then, time to start the brainwashing. Congratulations to our man Arash for passing his coming-of-age ceremony. Look, we caught this giant ant queen's head together. The scene was terrifying. The second I entered the nest, I saw a young orc battling the queen. It was only because you fought her for days that I was able to easily hunt down the exhausted beast. So, we caught this beast together. So, if Arash is a mighty warrior, what does that make me? The completely dizzy Arash immediately blurted out, "You are also a mighty warrior. And those 120 orc workers? You're a mighty warrior, so I can lend them to you." Later, I followed Arash back to the orc tribe, only to be told by their chief that they couldn't fulfill my request. I was so annoyed. Why backpedal now? It turned out these iron sand orcs needed to eat massive amounts of meat every day to build muscle. But because they had no way to preserve it, any meat not eaten immediately would spoil in a day. So they had to send out huge hunting parties working around the clock in 3 shifts. They literally had no spare hands for me. But I was dead set on getting those 120 orcs. If I had these superpowered workers, my territory's productivity would skyrocket by hundreds of times. Plus, the workout equipment these orcs were using, they were literally treasures that humans would kill for. I marveled at what an absolute waste of premium loot this was. So, to bag both the laborers and the treasure, I confidently promised the chief that I could make their meat last a long time without spoiling. Looking at this group of naturally overpowered ultimate workhorses and the ground littered with gold and silver being used as dumbbells, my ruthless capitalist DNA was completely boiling over. Just what kind of next-level trick will I use to keep the fresh meat from rotting? And how exactly will this bunch of simple-minded orcs become my relentless 24/7 corporate slaves? This dirt-covered construction grunt is actually the almighty, invincible sword saint. Everyone thought he was living in seclusion here, mastering some kind of world-destroying sword technique. But the truth is, he got duped by a shady lord and is stuck here working as free human dynamite. Just a moment ago, I signed a purchase order with the chieftain. I'm building them a stone ice house to preserve their food. They're paying me with exercise equipment, and in return, I'll provide stone workout gear as a replacement. And building that ice house requires this super hard granite. Beside me, Havel was wondering how on earth we were going to smash such a hard rock. Suddenly, I flashed him an evil grin. The moment Havel saw that face, he knew he was getting played. Turns out, even though this world doesn't have TNT, Havel is basically a walking detonator. It was one of the main storylines in the novel Ironblood Night. Back then, an entire city was trapped by a massive evil magic barrier, with thousands of civilians stuck inside. On the outside, Havel could only watch helplessly as the people's mana was drained away. He tried to shatter that barrier over and over again to save them. And that's when he unknowingly created his ultimate move, detonation. He smashed the barrier at the crucial moment and saved everyone. Now, since I've read the novel, I obviously know exactly how he unlocked that skill. So I shamelessly explained the mechanics to him. He demanded to know where I learned this stuff. I just threw on an innocent, naive face. I just came up with it. Do these eyes look like they're lying to you? Havel said my gaze was incredibly annoying, and that I was clearly lying. Seeing that he wasn't falling for it, I quickly changed the subject. Just go try it out. I mean, if it works, your sword skills will evolve. And if it doesn't, you don't lose anything. Left with no choice, Havel walked up to the granite. Following my instructions, he used one ring to protect his mana core, and then smashed the other 3 rings together. He plunged his sword right into the rock. The next second, the mana released in a flash. With a massive explosion, I stood there amazed that this guy actually nailed it on the first try. Truly the main character. Havel slowly walked out of the smoke. His clothes were blown to shreds, and his hair looked like he just got a really bad perm. He marched over and demanded, "Did you foresee this being a possibility?" I desperately held back my laughter and waved my hands, denying it. Then, the Grand Sword Saint Havel started rambling. "You know I'm a knight. I learned swordsmanship to protect my lord, not to work on a construction site." I just told him there was no need to thank me so much. Havel glared back and made it very clear he wasn't thankful at all. But right then, a system notification popped up. "Havel is grateful for your guidance. Affection level increased by 3 points." With the help of Havel's demolition skill, the rest of the construction flew by. I had my giant little bro chew the crushed granite into shape, and we didn't even have to lift a finger to move the shaped rocks. That bunch of endlessly energetic orcs just came over and did all the heavy lifting themselves. After all, it was a great chance for them to build some muscle. I just stood on the sidelines the whole time, casually fanning myself. Next, we just needed ice and insulation. But the 5 guys I sent out to get the insulation have been gone for 3 weeks. Normally, that's more than enough time for a round trip, which means if the soldiers aren't just slacking off, then something bad might have happened to them on the road. So, I got up and prepared to go look for them. Havel stepped in to stop me, saying he'd handle the mission solo, because even though he didn't know what was going on, it was way too dangerous for the heir of the territory to go in person. I told him in all seriousness, I'm the project manager, so I'm responsible for everything regarding my crew. Ultimately, Havel and I headed out together. Along the way, I found a glove native to our territory, along with the straw meant for insulation, but there was no sign of our people. Suddenly, Havel noticed the mana flow in the canyon ahead felt unnatural. Hearing the name of that canyon, something clicked, and a terrible feeling washed over me. I immediately told Havel to follow my lead, because if we didn't hurry, those 5 soldiers might already be completely wiped out. This guy is storming into a creepy cave, completely ignoring hundreds of deadly magic traps along the way. You probably think he's some righteous hero out to save the world, or maybe a greedy madman after legendary treasure, but actually, he's just a fiercely protective, ruthless capitalist, coming straight for the poor sucker who dared to touch his private property. Just a moment ago, we arrived at this cave. This is the spot Havel raids early on in the novel, and it's also the hideout of the dark mage, Ruflin. I'm thinking to myself, this guy actually had the nerve to touch my soldiers? He damaged my private property, and honestly, taking his life for that wouldn't even be an overreaction. Havel takes the lead, marching right toward the cave entrance. I try to shout a warning, but it's too late. Good thing I'm quick. I yank him back just in time. The very next second, boom. Turns out that dark mage rigged the whole cave with magic traps. Mr. Havel, aren't you a knight? Shouldn't you at least consider the possibility of traps in a place like this? I tell him to sharpen his mana perception. Normally, the mana density in the air is constant, so any spot with a magic trap is bound to feel a little different. In the novel, Havel actually triggers that first trap, and then uses this exact method to bypass the rest, eventually dragging his battered, bloody body into the dungeon. But what I don't know is that Havel is getting more and more suspicious. He's already certain the guy standing in front of him knows exactly what's happening now, and what's going to happen next, yet he can't sense a single drop of special energy coming from him. Meanwhile, deep inside the cave, the dark mage Ruflin is getting ready to sacrifice the 5 people he just kidnapped. "Hey punk, keep your hands off my private property. Do you have a death wish or something?" The man can't believe anyone actually made it inside. He set up hundreds of traps out there. He immediately uses his magic to drop a steel gate, and then releases a massive cloud of sleeping gas. He's a bit shocked, sure, but hey, 2 free sacrifices delivered right to his door isn't a bad deal either. But I'm not panicking at all. I hold my breath, activate my vigorous vitality skill, and start digging straight down. This skill means I won't feel a drop of fatigue for the next 10 minutes. Havel, on the other hand, doesn't even need to worry about the gas. He's completely immune to sedatives. What I don't realize, though, is that Havel thinks I look exactly like a giant mole digging through the dirt, and he's totally planning to roast me about it later. Once I dig deep enough, I call Havel in, and tell him to use his new detonation skill to blow it wide open. With a massive boom, Ruflin stumbles backward in shock and falls to the ground. He just stares, as a human hand slowly creeps out of the hole. "Hello there, you little punk. First time seeing an entrance like this, huh? You dared to touch my private property. So now, I'm going to show you something way darker than dark magic." He might look like an ordinary down-on-his-luck young master, but he's got 100 fierce orcs swearing absolute loyalty to him. Everyone thinks he's some saint out to save the world, or some ridiculously OP chosen one. But honestly, he's just a ruthless, cold-hearted capitalist, whose mind is full of schemes to exploit free labor. Just a second ago, a furious Ruflin fired up a summoning spell. The next moment, a massive two-faced ogre crawled out of the magic circle. It was a byproduct of his failed resurrection spell, with skin as hard as solid steel. I was just about to warn Havel that this thing might be a pain to deal with, when he suddenly leapt into the air. With a single, explosive midair slash, he sliced the steel-hard ogre right in half. I stood there totally confused, because I definitely remembered the novel didn't have this move. Ruflin was absolutely terrified now. He knew he was done for. There was no way he could beat the 2 guys standing in front of him, no matter what he did. "You little punk, this is all your fault for kidnapping my soldiers and delaying my construction schedule for weeks. Tell me, how are you going to pay me back?" Hearing this, Ruflin immediately dropped to his knees and begged for mercy, saying this place was full of expensive magic items and I could take all of them if I wanted. I gave him a wicked smirk. Well then, I guess everything here belongs to me now. Havel checked on the 5 kidnapped soldiers and said they had just passed out from exhaustion. No immediate danger. I asked Ruflin what the hell he was doing kidnapping all these people. Turns out, he used to be a mage in the Lord's City, living an ordinary happy life with his family, until the Lord at the time stole his wife and murdered his son. Right there, I told him to shut it. So, to save your own wife and kid, you think it's perfectly fine to slaughter hundreds of innocent people? Just because you're pathetic, you get to sacrifice other people's families and happiness? No matter how you spin it, what you are doesn't change. You completely destroyed people who were just as happy as you once were. After saying my piece, I stood up. and told him that if he ever hurt anyone again, there would be no more mercy. In the original novel, Havel did spare Rufarin, and after that, he went on to kill hundreds more, modified his own body, and eventually became a recurring villain who wouldn't stop pestering Havel. Knowing all this, I still turned my back and walked away. Why? Because I knew a leopard never changes its spots, and he'd try to sneak attack me. So, I had already given Havel the signal. Havel spun around in a flash, lifting his sword, and sliced the guy's head clean off with a single strike. Back in my old world, working on construction sites, there was this old guy who would always get on my case over the tiniest things. Every time he insulted and tormented me, I just kept swallowing my pride. I thought holding back would buy me long-term peace, but he just took me for a pushover. His insults got worse and worse every single time. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw a punch, and then another. And you know what? After that, the guy never dared to bother me again. That's why, when dealing with bad guys, you need a punishment fit for bad guys. With everything sorted, I took the 5 rescued soldiers and the insulation materials, and we headed back to the orc tribe. Seeing how weak they were, I ordered them to hand their backpacks over to me. They never expected the heir to the territory to actually carry their luggage, and immediately burst into tears of gratitude. Suddenly, a system notification popped up. The rescued soldiers are infinitely grateful for your actions. They will spread word of your noble deeds far and wide. Do you feel a great sense of accomplishment? I was utterly speechless. I thought this little stunt would earn me some RP points. A sense of accomplishment can't be cashed in for money, so I don't need it. Back at the orc tribe, they had already finished building the stone ice house. We had the insulation. Now, the only thing missing was the ice. Havel wondered aloud where we were supposed to find ice out in this scorching wasteland. Honestly, I had no idea where to get ice right now either. Havel's heart skipped a beat, seeing in my eyes that I truly had zero plan. He immediately called me out, accusing me of running a scam, since I signed the contract before even figuring out a solution. I just asked him if he knew the defining trait of successful people. Losers always find every excuse why something won't work and then never try. But winners, they take action first and figure out how to clean up the mess later. That is the entrepreneurial spirit. Havel definitely didn't buy it, because if that were true, the losers would outnumber the winners 1,000 to 1. That evening, I sat up on the mountain trying to figure out how to make ice. This world has freezing magic, and nature holds all sorts of different manas. Condensing fire mana creates fire magic. Suddenly, an idea hit me. The next day, I made molds for the ice blocks, then had the boys pour the water they hauled into them. Then, I stuck my hand into the water and focused, using the properties of the Azrahan technique, which absorbs external mana. If I just sucked out all the warm mana from the water, wouldn't the only thing left in my hands be cold mana? And it actually worked. Next, all we had to do was wrap the ice blocks in the insulation, and a real, functioning stone ice house to preserve food was finished. Arash and his dad were thrilled. After all, now they didn't have to hunt every single day, and they didn't have to worry about leftover meat going bad. I looked over at Havel with a smug grin. See? That's the entrepreneurial spirit. Havel just sighed and admitted defeat. And just like that, I fulfilled my end of the contract and successfully secured 120 orcs. Chieftain Akush thanked me with deadly seriousness. They didn't think fulfilling a contract was just some given obligation. So, he announced that from this moment on, the Iron Sand tribe was forging a blood pact with my territory. My friends were their friends, my enemies were their enemies, and if my lands were ever in danger, they would rush to our aid at a moment's notice. Right then, my system chimed in again. Race unlocked. Reward, 100 RP. It turns out, raising the orcs' affection levels also gets me RP points. So, I headed back home with my 120 orcs, but the second we arrived, we scared the absolute crap out of my residents. I mean, 120 hulking muscle bros marching into town all at once? Yeah, that is pretty terrifying. He looks like just an ordinary smiling lord, and his employees are often moved to tears. You'd definitely think he's some generous saint giving away his fortune, but actually, it's just a classic capitalist playbook to squeeze out every last drop of value. To keep his debt-ridden wage slaves working endlessly, he won't even let the dead off the hook. Just now, while digging through my Luvelin magical items back at the territory, I found a book detailing how to turn a corpse into a ghoul. So I immediately found my employee, and happily told him that once he dies, I'm going to turn him into a ghoul. Since this guy scammed me out of millions, he needs to work for me for 520 years to pay it off. But how could a human possibly live to 520? Well, with the method in this book, he can truly work for me for a full 520 years. Isn't that just incredibly exciting? Look, after hearing this great news, he's actually shedding tears of pure joy. Right then, even the system couldn't help but chime in. The Lord of Hell admires my character and is considering hiring me. After a warm chat with Toldes, I headed back to the manor. I needed to discuss something with the Baron, but a maid told me he had guests. Hearing it was the 2 creditors coming to collect the territory's debt, I immediately got excited again. At that moment, the 2 were demanding the Baron hand over the mining rights. In exchange, they'd agree to only take 10% of the principal for now. Suddenly, I make my grand entrance. Oh my, it's been ages, you two. How have you been? I heard from outside that you offered a pretty good deal. Could I perhaps offer you a proposal too? The fat guy sneered that he didn't want to hear any of my crap. Suddenly, a terrifying orc named Akush stepped into the room. Having never seen an orc before, the 2 were instantly scared shitless. Anyone who bullies the Frontera family, our Steel Sand Orc clan will risk everything to destroy them. I chuckled and told Akush it was fine, then turned back to the terrified duo. Please don't mind my friend here. Now, would you like to consider my proposal? We'll pay off the debt little by little, so please lower the future interest rates. If you refuse, my friend here will be very sad. If he does something irrational later, I won't be able to stop him. Eventually, they agreed to the deal and fled for their lives. I told the Baron that the underfloor heating project was slowly expanding, and the coal mining was going smoothly, so we should be able to pay off the debt very soon. But right now, there's one big problem. An orc's appetite is 10 times that of a normal person. But don't worry too much, because an orc's work efficiency is 100 times better. And this orc, he's been working for 24 hours straight. Hearing this, I immediately had him dragged back to rest. Even then, he He didn't want to stop. He just wanted to work out and build bigger muscles. The best part is these orcs don't even want a salary. They just want to be fed. In a boss's eyes, that is the absolute perfect employee. Still, at this stage, orc food is a hefty expense. So I told the Baron we need to increase our tax revenue to buy the meat. Considering the future efficiency of the coal mine, this is definitely not a losing deal. But the Baron argued that the residents' living standards are already poor. Raising taxes would just add insult to injury for their struggling families. I told him we aren't just blindly raising rates. We just need to help the residents make more money, and the tax revenue will naturally go up. So I'm going to turn the Maris wetlands in the north into farmland. Then we divide the land among the residents, let them farm to their heart's content, rake in the cash, and then make them pay more taxes. Afterwards, I took Javiel to the Mares wetlands. He pointed out that this land has been abandoned for centuries. How could we possibly farm in a place like this? Honestly, I don't have a concrete plan yet either. But making big promises first and figuring it out later, that is the true entrepreneurial spirit. That night, I found an empty plot of land and started simulating farmland designs. I had to design a structure that could drain the water perfectly, even if it rained. And so I simulated day and night, sometimes even forgetting to eat or rest. Finally, on the 30th day, I finished the design. The water could drain smoothly. Draining the water means increasing the taxes, which means I'm getting closer and closer to my comfortable aristocratic retirement. Suddenly, the system tells me I have a dedicated design simulation skill. It lets me operate and simulate in a virtual space based on measured data. I cursed at the system. How could you hide something this good? You made me suffer for a whole month. I stood up and dusted myself off. No time to argue with the system now. I have more important things to do, because I'm about to draw my third fantasy partner. After all, the first step in the Maris Wetlands project is to drain all the water. Having the giant-sized big guy and little Belle slowly drink it up could work, but that's pushing it. So, I'm going to dump all my RP points and draw as many fantasy partners as I can. This draw costs 100 RP. Looks like after every draw, the cost goes up by 1.5 times. Come on, my third fantasy partner. And this time, I got a tiny hippo. However, reading his manual left me pretty disappointed because he can't be enlarged using the red sunflower seeds. Sure, the manual says he can drink water, but how much could a little runt like this actually drink? Yet, in the very next second, this little guy swallowed the entire wetlands water in one gulp, and the more he drinks, the bigger he gets. Plus, he can spit all that water right back out. I was amazed that such a tiny hippo could drink so much. With him around, turning the wetlands into farmland just got a whole lot easier. As the little hippo drained the wetlands, I could finally get people to clear the exposed weeds. Then, Javiel used explosives to blast holes in the ground, and we inserted bamboo into them. We packed sand around the bamboo to make sand piles, then had the big guy roll over it to compact the foundation. Once the deep groundwater was collected into the bamboo straws, the little hippo sucked it all dry in one gulp. Finally, I had the men build embankments, a much more refined plan I came up with using my simulation skill. Just like that, 10 days passed, and we finally finished converting one zone of the Maris wetlands into farmland. I loudly encouraged my employees. We still have a long, hard road ahead of us, but once the entire project is done, bonuses will be handed out. So keep up the good work. Javiel looked out over the area below. He never imagined that a land abandoned for centuries was truly turning into arable farmland. And he didn't even know when it happened, but he had naturally started helping with the manual labor too. Just as he was thinking he absolutely needed to rebel next time, he heard someone calling him. Javiel, hurry up and plant these seeds over there. We need to plant them to drive away pests and protect the territory. Feeling helpless, he eventually had no choice but to obediently water and plant the seeds. Months passed. The seeds Javiel had carefully watered every day had finally grown, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Standing off to the side, I mentioned that once the water wheels were installed, the Maris wetlands renovation would officially be complete. I was just thinking the water wheel technicians should be arriving soon, when I spotted a group of uninvited guests in the distance. It was Viscount Lacona, from the territory north of the wetlands. His lackey barked first. Which of you is the site manager here? Do you not know this is Viscount Lacona's land? I order you to evacuate this place immediately.